Welcome to the very first edition of WeatherWise from the First Alert Storm Team. I'm meteorologist John Nodar.
I'm meteorologist Caroline Carithers, and we're going to be talking about different topics. That's what WeatherWise is. It's different weather topics that we don't have time to delve into on TV.
All right, and in this case, it's going to be tropical weather because this is hurricane season on the Gulf Coast. And we'll start off with the tropical weather hazards. I think if you're new to the Gulf Coast, this is going to be very interesting to you. If you're a tropical storm veteran, you probably will still find some interesting information here.
For sure, because we've seen changes over the past couple of years, and one of the changes that we've seen are in the fatalities and what is killing the most people with these tropical systems.
You know, it's always been run from the water. The water is what is killing people, and that is the case, but it's a little different in how that's occurring. For a long time, from 1963 to 2012, storm surge flooding accounted for most of the deaths in tropical storms, hurricanes, and tropical depressions.
Yeah, and now as we look at a new data set, which is from 2013 to 2023, which didn't even account for last year, it's actually inland flooding.
And a lot of that is attributable to Helene last year, which killed a lot of people up in North Carolina and parts of North Georgia. And you can see here another thing is the surf.
Yeah.
We've got people that are being killed mostly by rip currents, I would assume here. And rip currents, by the way, over the course of the entire year, are the number one weather-related killer for this part of the Gulf Coast. But this is just in tropical systems.
Well, in tropical systems, too, it's the only time the Gulf has waves big enough to surf on.
Right.
And so that's when people are like, I'm going to go out there. And no, don't do that.
Okay,
don't
well,
do that.
You consider yourself admonished. Let's take a look at storm surge for starters. And we'll open up with this picture from Helene, which is actually quite early in Helene as the water was just coming on shore. It ended up at about 15, 16 feet in places.
Super impressive. Yeah, this was along Florida's Big Bend, and you can see how fast it comes on. That's what's scary about storm surge, to me at least, personally, is that it comes fast and furious.
It does, and it is like it's a bulge of water that is pushed along ahead. It's partly because of the lower barometric pressure, but also mostly being pushed along by the wind out ahead of the storm.
Right.
It can be up to 28 feet.
Right.
At least that's the highest I've seen, and that was during Katrina in Waveland, Mississippi.
Well, and the thing with storm surges, too, is it's mainly focused on the eastern side of the storm. We often call this the dirty side of the storm or the wet side of the storm, and that's because of the way low pressure systems rotate. They're rotating counterclockwise, so that side of the storm is getting the southerly winds that's pushing the water up onto the coastline.
Right. All right, so let's take a look at storm surge from weaker storms, and that would generally just be high waves and some coastal erosion, which we see generally on Dauphin Island, which has been through, 2 or 3 berms now? And then you've got Gulf Shores, which is constantly replenishing the beautiful white sand beaches there. So, yeah, that's what weaker storms can do.
Yeah, and then we get a stronger storm, maybe Category 1, Category 2 hurricane, and this is where we have more significant surge. So this is water starting to make its way into homes, in sweeping cars away, that type of thing. Major beach erosion here. All
right, and then finally, with the strongest storms, you're looking at destructive storm surge over 20 feet. It's a major threat to life and property. Couple of things to note here. Number one is that storm surge does not account for waves. So it's just the mean level of the water. The waves are on top of storm surge. So if you've got a 20-foot storm surge, there could be 8, 10-foot waves on top of that.
Cresting waves, yeah. And that's not something you think of when you're like, okay, it's going to top out here. That's just not the case.
Right, and in Katrina, the destruction there, I mean, it pushed pretty much everything that was on the coast a quarter of a mile in.
And I remember Katrina I was in 3rd grade. But I remember Katrina because I moved here 3 days after, so I saw the destruction of the storm surge. You covered Katrina.
I did.
And it was, you've described it to me as post-apocalyptic.
It was horrifying, and never want to experience anything like that again, but we have to be prepared for whatever comes our way. Let's look at inland flooding now, and as you saw early in this podcast, we we're talking about the rise of inland flooding deaths, and it has to do a lot with Helene.
With Helene, yeah. Helene moved so quickly, and you'll remember this from last year. It really impacted the Carolinas and up into the Tennessee Valley, and horrific stories coming. They're just not built for it up there, one.
Right.
They don't deal with hurricanes normally, and so it's something that they weren't prepared for, and then they're still rebuilding after Helene.
Oh, yeah. They're probably still rebuilding after Harvey in 2017. It was,
my gosh, yes.
It was a mess in Texas.
Rainmaker.
Then we had Ida and Allison and Florence that you see here. For our neighborhood, I think the rainmaker was Danny in 1996, 36 inches of rain on Dauphin Island.
Jeez,
a yard
crazy.
of rain.
That's crazy. And then Sally had 30 inches, I think.
Close to that.
Yeah, because it stopped along our coastline. But here's a look at Helene's flooding. This was in North Carolina. This gives me chills to see every time.
It is terrifying. And what happens in this case, you had a storm that was a big, at landfall, Category 4 storm, but moving rapidly at 26.7 miles an hour. So it carried that momentum and that tropical moisture way inland.
Way inland, yeah. And the thing with Helene, too, is because it's mountainous up there, landslides.
Right.
Mudslides.
Landslides, mudslides, and all that enormous amount of tropical rain is funneled down those mountainsides, and what used to be a babbling scenic brook is now a raging torrent and a killer.
It was so hard to see. It still is.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to revisit that story for a hurricane special, and ooh, that's hard.
All right, so wettest on record, Harvey still takes the cake at 60 plus inches of rain. Lane not far behind in Hawaii. And then Amelia, Easy, and Claudette.
Oh, Claudette. That was Claudette of 1979, Claudette.
Okay.
We had a different Claudette as well. So high winds, something that we also talk about. This is the one that I feel like most people talk about.
Right, if you got a hurricane, you're thinking, whoa, 74 plus mile an hour winds.
Well, and that's what the categories are based on. And this is something that we try to hammer home, is that the categories are only based on wind, not water, not rip currents, not anything like that, not flooding.
Not storm surge.
Not storm surge. It is just the wind. That's why we say try not to focus on the category, because Sally was only a Category 2, which you'd think, okay.
Right.
But then it dropped 30 inches of rain.
Right, because it was moving forward at like 2 miles an hour.
Right.
So here's Helene again, and this is what happens when you get a storm that is zooming forward. It brought hurricane force winds plus into places like Mount Mitchell, North Carolina at 106 miles an hour.
How crazy is that? And up to North Carolina, 101 miles per hour?
Right.
I mean,
and again, this is 400 miles inland.
that's not, usually you'd think, oh, okay, this came in from the Atlantic. This came in from the East Coast. No, this came from the Gulf. It moved straight through. That's
For us, Zeta was the fast mover that brought hurricane force winds far inland, in our case, into Washington County, Alabama, where it knocked out the power for 95% of the people.
Which is wild. And Zeta was hard because we had just come off of Sally, who moved at 2 miles an hour and then stopped on our coastline. Then we had Zeta that zipped right through.
It was like a rocket.
It was.
All right, tornadoes.
Something that we don't talk about as much, I feel like, just because they're not commonly associated with hurricanes. I feel like they're their own thing, you know?
And in a hurricane, they kind of get lost in the
Everything
already, 100 mile an hour winds or whatever you happen to have in that storm. But these tornadoes can spin up quickly. They are a little different from a supercell tornado that we would come rushing on and warn you about during any other time of the year. If it's a tropical system, these tend to spin up faster, go away faster, but they also move faster because they're being carried along those rain bands at 70 plus miles an hour.
A little bit more zip to them for sure. And they usually are a little bit weaker, as John was saying. They're EF0, EF1s in our area for the most part. They're in the rain bands that are kind of like little lines of showers and thunderstorms. And the highest tornado count from a tropical cyclone, Ivan, you remember Ivan?
Yeah, I do. And Ivan, it was it was a nightmare. Ivan did more damage at my house in Midtown Mobile than any other storm I've lived through at this point.
Interesting.
Beulah, 67, Francis, 2004, 103, and then 98 in Rita. There's a lot of 2004, 2005 going on here.
That was a rough couple of years. That was Katrina. That was Ivan. I mean,
Yeah.
Ooh, and then we had Beryl in 2024. That 68. 68.
Gustav is the one that jumps to mind for me, but it wasn't
Yeah.
even on the list. It was quite a tornado maker. Look at this. This is Milton.
Oh
Good
my gosh.
grief.
I remember this picture, this screenshot came out, after all the storm surveys were done and things like that. And watching this unfold was insane.
Yeah, 126 warnings, 45 confirmed tornadoes out of this, and they had some EF3s, which is rare in a tropical
Rare.
system.
Yeah, usually it's EF0, EF1, but EF3 tornadoes. I mean, coming out of an already intense hurricane.
Right. Now, just to give you an idea, an EF1 will do like siding damage or roof
Yeah.
damage to a structure home, not a mobile home, but a site-built home. EF2 can do severe damage, but you're likely to see at least the interior wall staying put. EF3 can knock down a lot of a building.
Right, and that's so scary. This is actually video from Milton. This is in South Florida, and this is what we call a wedge tornado. This is intense.
And this is one of those EF3s
EF3s,
that we just
yeah.
were talking about.
They're really intense, and I hate seeing video like that. It's scary. So key takeaways from us today, from us to you. Numerous hazards are before and after the storm. And people say, oh, thank goodness we're out of the cone.
Right.
That is not what we need to be thinking.
No, you need to think about the hazards. The idea of the cone is to tell you where the center might be. So if the center is at the edge of that cone, the effects go way beyond the outside of the cone. Then you get a narrow cone, like with Zeta. The storm itself is wider than the cone, so you're gonna
Right. I mean, they were just confident that that's where Zeta was going to go. That's why the cone was so small.
Know your risks. If you're close to the coastline, obviously you're going to need to evacuate in a big storm. If you have a home that is already in a flood-prone area, you need to be very, very aware of what's happening.
And know your evacuation zones, because they change sometimes. So be careful there. And it's not just a coastal problem. We saw that with Helene.
Right. So I hope we've given you at least some useful information in this first edition of Weatherwise. There are many more on the way over the next weeks and months.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm meteorologist John Nodar.
Meteorologist Caroline Carruthers. Have a great day.